Chapter 31. Because I can't bear to part with young Master You. 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 31. Because I can't bear to part with young Master You. 1. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yan Qingxi had just about had it with Yu Tingfeng, but her professionalism ensured that her smile did not falter. She placed her palms on his chest and said coyly, "I am impatient. I want to see how manly Mr. Yu is." Yu Tingfeng replied, "Satisfaction guaranteed." The blatantly suggestive exchange made the old men around the table blush. A shadow crossed Yu Tingfeng's eyes and he tightened his grip on Yan Qingxi's waist. Miss Mai was not dumb, she could tell that the scene unfolding here went beyond carnal intentions. There was some backstory between these two and she was going to find out. Miss Mai interjected, "I apologize Mr. Yu. Qingxi is new and she's still green. I'll give her a lecture when we get home." "Qingxi, come on. You're making a scene." Yu Tingfeng gave her a stare that made her heart freeze. She could feel goosebumps rising just from that chilling look. She had been in the entertainment industry for many years and had seen all sorts of people. Even the seasoned actors that frequently took on roles as emperors did not have a stare as terrifying as Yu Tingfeng's. Yan Qingxi took the cue and stood up. She smiled at the stunned director Chai and his company. "Please excuse me for today." Miss Mai hurried Yan Qingxi out of the room. They did not get far before Miss Mai raised the question, "You and Yu Tingfeng, is there some grudge between the two of you? You knew him from before." She pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered one to Yan Qingxi. The fact that Yan Qingxi slept with Yu Tingfeng the other night remained unknown to her. Yan Qingxi lit the cigarette and took a drag. She blew out a smoke ring and said, "Something like that." Yan Qingxi's expression was one of repressed anger. Judging from the look on Yan Qingxi's face, Miss Mai knew that there was more to their relationship than meets the eye. Relationship problems. Yan Qingxi barked a laugh, ash fell from the cigarette as her hand shook. "Haha. Relationship. Miss Mai, you give me too much credit. If I was involved with the young master of the Yu family, do you think I would be slumming here now?" Yan Qingxi was agitated and impatient with their progress. 2 years ago, Yan Qingxi met a touring Miss Mai abroad who said her face was suited for the entertainment circle. Hence, now that she was back, she intended to build her career first before taking care of the Yan family. However, misfortune seemed to favor her as shown by the recent developments. Whether her career would gain traction was still up in the air. Where did that leave her plot for revenge? Yan Qingxi was at wit's end. What Yan Qingxi said was true enough. If she was related to Yu Tingfeng in any way, she would not be in this situation. She would not have any trouble getting roles, let alone financial assistance. Disgust roiled in Miss Mai as she recalled the words spoken by Yu Tingfeng and the perverse nature of his actions. In her eyes, he was intentionally making Yan Qingxi uncomfortable. He was a powerful man, but to abuse his status and bully a young lady. While Miss Mai dared not to offend Yu Tingfeng, she had him labeled as a douchebag. She took a drag of the cigarette in hand and said, "You're a bit down on your luck." Getting the 2 auditions was a stroke of luck, but one was ruined by the Luo family while the movie role was a botched attempt. Then, some asterisk shoal takes advantage of you and now, Yu Tingfeng decides that you're a good target. Life is not cutting you a break. Yan Qingxi blew another smoke ring and let her eyes roam. A man exited a private room. She squinted her eyes and a cold smile formed on her red lips. "You're right. That man truly is an asterisk shoal." Chapter 32. Because I can't bear to part with young Master You. 2. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 32. Because I can't bear to part with young Master You. 2. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Miss Mai said, "You can head home first. This movie probably won't work to our advantage." It'll save us the trouble of dealing with the young master. Yan Qingxi was touched. Thank you, Miss Mai. I'll head in now. All right. Yan Qingxi glanced at the figure on the phone standing a few feet away from them. A smirk formed on her lips. Yu Tingfeng ended the phone call and went back to the private room. There was no sign of Yan Qingxi, so he asked Miss Mai about it. Apparently, Yan Qingxi left because she was feeling unwell. Hearing the news, Yu Tingfeng's mood darkened. If Yan Qingxi was not here, why was he wasting his time? He left the room with a gloomy face. Once out of the steamboat shop, Yu Tingfeng took off his jacket in disgust. The smoke from the steamboat had seeped into his jacket and it smelled repulsive. Yu Tingfeng walked to his car that parked right outside the shop. The driver quickly came down from the car and opened the backseat door for him. He bent down and got into the car. As the driver was closing the door, someone knocked into him. What's your problem? The driver raised his arm to block the person, but he was too slow. The person had already wormed into the car. The night sky was only dimly lit, but Yu Tingfeng could clearly identify the other person sitting beside him. Surprise dawned on his face, but it was followed with a chuckle. Didn't you go home? Yan Qingxi ran her hand through her hair and shot him a mysterious smile. You said before, how could I bear to part with you? Didn't Mr. Yu say you wanted to have a go tonight? Or was that all talk? Yan Qingxi was not a lady to be taken advantage of. After the trickery that night, she was not going to lie back and take it. Though she was not allowed to have an emotional outburst, she was not going to let Yu Tingfeng enjoy his win. If I can't take you down, I can at least raise hell. Yu Tingfeng was a man of delicate taste. All she had to do was find the nicest car in the area. Yan Qingxi walked out to the car park and surveyed the area. After spotting the potential car, she kept a lookout for Yu Tingfeng from a short distance. Yu Tingfeng's frustration ebbed after seeing Yan Qingxi. His 2 fingers lifted her jaw and his eyes studied her face, a grin formed on his. The helpless driver was at a loss. Mr. Yu. In a flash, Yu Tingfeng's slender arm pulled Yan Qingxi into his embrace. Drive. The driver averted his eyes and quickly sat back in the driver's seat. Yan Qingxi was pliant in his arms, her weight fully on him. Her scent permeated through the narrow confines of the car. She had a unique scent that was intoxicating and addictive. In the past 3 years, Yu Tingfeng had rarely thought of her existence. Yet this scent had pervaded him every day and night. With his urge unchecked, Yu Tingfeng leaned down to capture Yan Qingxi's lips, but she moved away at the last second. His kiss landed by her ear instead. Yu Tingfeng nibbled at her earlobe. His raspy voice rumbled into her ear. To the hotel. With the element of surprise, Yan Qingxi pushed him away. In a flurry of movements, Yan Qingxi straddled Yu Tingfeng's thighs and laughed sarcastically at him. Hotel. How about we do it in the car? I don't want to be left paying the hotel bill when some money. Obsessed * shoal just UPS and leaves. Chapter 33. Mr. Yu is hardcore. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 33. Mr. Yu is hardcore. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A devilish smile graced Yan Qingxi's lips. Also, I've never had sex in a Maybach before. Her frivolous tone was aimed to mislead people into believing that she had had car sex with a lot of men before. In the shadows, a cold aura surrounded Yu Tingfeng. Yan Qingxi ignored his suppressed anger and started to unbutton his shirt. The angrier he gets, the better. She was not here to please him. The more unpleasant this was for him, the better she felt. Yu Tingfeng's shirt was custom-made from overseas. The buttons on his cuffs even had jewels embedded in them. As she undressed him, she said, "Weren't there rumors about me? Saying that my boobs are fake, my waist is thin because of liposuction and that my face has undergone cosmetic surgery. Even after all that, you still want to have sex with me. Now, aren't you hardcore? Yu Tingfeng did not move a muscle as she went about her way with his clothes. He raised an eyebrow at her questioningly, are you angry about that? Oh. So you aren't blind. I thought you had some eye disease, Yan Qingxi said sardonically. She released the last button on his shirt. His upper body was bare to Yan Qingxi. Lean and strong muscles made up his frame without the unnerving bulges seen on muscular men. His waist was as slender as a woman's. Yan Qingxi was familiar with the perfection which was his body since 3 years ago. She trailed her right index finger down his chest. It would be a waste to not touch perfection. Her hand was arrested when she dipped down to his abdomen. Eager aren't we? The edge of her lips quirked as she pulled up the hem of her dress. She peeled open the neckline of her dress, exposing a generous amount of fair skin. Her dainty shoulders and breasts held up by a black bra were out on display for Yu Tingfeng. The night was rife with sin and seduction. Yan Qingxi grabbed his hands and placed them on her chest. Why yes, I am eager. Eager to show you that I am the real deal and not some plastic doll. Stop the car. Yu Tingfeng's loud voice boomed. The driver momentarily lost control of the car due to shock and they swerved an S. When he regained his senses, he quickly brought the car to a stop. Get out, Yu Tingfeng commanded. The driver was confused. Was this order for him or for the lady in the back seat? Get out. Yu Tingfeng repeated harshly. The harshness in his tone got the driver going. He left the car and ran a good 20 meters away in a single breath. Within the car, there left only Yu Tingfeng and Yan Qingxi. She was in his lap biting his neck. Scared that someone sees us, she chuckled. Yu Tingfeng held her waist and started kissing her exposed shoulder. Your aunt was right. You really are shameless. A glint of bitterness flashed in Yan Qingxi's eyes. Yen Rook. She was going to kill that B*TCH one day. Yan Qingxi pressed down harder on his thighs and retorted, and you? You're not shameless. You're still with my aunt, aren't you? And here you are, fooling around with her niece. Aren't you a shameless piece of work, Mr. Yu? Yu Tingfeng exhaled loudly through his nose. Yan Qingxi truly was a she-devil and he was entranced by her. He wanted to know exactly how far would she go. He felt like he was going mad. His breathing labored as he fondled for the zipper to her dress. You really are. Fingers brushed against the hidden metal zipper and Yu Tingfeng let out a pained cry. Chapter 34. Her man was nothing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 34. Her man was nothing. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yu Tingfeng let out a pained groan. The shadows in the car flickered. The next moments had Yan Qingxi kicking the car door open and running barefooted at top speed with Yu Tingfeng's custom-made shirt clutched tightly in her hands. A bewildered Yu Tingfeng felt about his neck. His face was almost distorted by his anger as he shouted, Yan Qingxi, you B*TCH. You better get back here. Yan Qingxi was already standing across the road beneath the streetlight, her head held high. She had on a defiant look as she licked the blood at the side of her mouth like a vampire right after a meal. There was a delighted smile on her face. A man was truly at his weakest when consumed by lust. How else would she have pulled off something like this? She not only got a bite of his neck, she even landed a kick on his package. With a flick of her wrist, Yu Tingfeng's shirt landed in the trash can. Yan Qingxi followed up with a middle finger in his direction as she tipped her head back as if challenging him. After some adjustments to her own clothes, she hailed a passing cab and left without looking back. The whole scene played out in less than a minute. As she sat in the cab, the thought of a dark-faced Yu Tingfeng made her smile. The topless Yu Tingfeng could not run after her without embarrassing himself in public. She initially wanted to steal even his pants, but that would reduce her chance of escaping. Yan Qingxi had had enough of Yu Tingfeng and his uppity behavior. She was done with his demeaning stare. She was not going to lie down and let him have his way with her just because he lusted for her. She wanted him to have a taste of the forbidden fruit but nothing more. He missed his chance to sleep with her. If it were not for the fear of retaliation, Yan Qingxi would have made sure he never had children with that kick. Yen Rook's man. Heh. He was nothing. Yu Tingfeng's mood was as if he swallowed a few 100 kilos of explosives. Here he was, topless and his neck wounded by Yan Qingxi's bite attack. He had been seduced by countless ladies before but he was never on the losing end. He could not believe that she managed to trick him. It was truly the most embarrassing moment in his life. To think that he believed Yan Qingxi wanted to have car sex with him. Yu Tingfeng never thought the adjective gullible would be used to describe him. Alas, today's encounter with Yan Qingxi proved him wrong. The driver saw Yan Qingxi running out of the car from afar and figured something was wrong. He quickly approached the vehicle. Young master. Young master. All he saw was Yu Tingfeng with his torso bared and a bite mark on his neck that did not look like it would heal anytime soon. That was all he needed to see. He looked away. We're heading home. Yes, sir. The driver immediately climbed into the driver's seat. Initially, the driver assumed the young master would be furious at this incident, but 10 minutes into their drive, Yu Tingfeng started laughing. The driver was startled by the laughter. He was perplexed. A half-naked Yu Tingfeng sat in the dark. A wicked grin widened on his face. His fingers danced across the bite mark Yan Qingxi left. He chuckled, just you wait, Yan Qingxi. This game was turning interesting. You have balls, Yan Qingxi. Chapter 35. This brazen little minx. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 35. This brazen little minx. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. When Yu Tingfeng arrived home, he was in a new set of clothes carrying a bag into the living room. It was past 11 o'clock at night but there were still people talking in the Yu family living room. Tingfeng, you're home. Yu Tingfeng answered lazily, Ma, you're still not sleeping. His mother, Mrs. Yu, stood up and said, this is not. Mrs. Yu's words were interrupted by the person beside her. Tingfeng, you're home. I was free today so I came over to visit Auntie and we didn't notice the time. The appearance of Yen Rook immediately had an effect on Yu Tingfeng's demeanor. He ignored her and addressed his mother, Ma, you're old now. Don't stay up so late unless you want more wrinkles on your face. Mrs. Yu was 50-odd years old but her daily skincare routine made her appear 10 years younger. She touched her face and said, wrinkles. I'm tired. I'm gonna head up and sleep. Yu Tingfeng's patience was running low. Mrs. Yu caught his arm. Wait a minute. Rook has been waiting a long time for you. She did it voluntarily. Not my business. Yu Tingfeng was never interested in Yen Rook. A few years back, Yen Rook assisted his mother with some matter and managed to charm the elderly woman. Since then, Yen Rook had declared herself as Yu Tingfeng's fiancée to the public. Yu Tingfeng treated the whole affair with indifference. He had not spared Yen Rook a glance in the past 3 years, let alone talk to her, yet she remained unflustered. It was a wonder how she continued to manipulate the public's perception of their relationship as if they were a loving couple. This type of woman, with her ambitions bare to all, had no place in Yu Tingfeng's eyes. If not for his mother, he would have long since taken care of her. Mrs. Yu had intended to let her son and Yen Rook mingle but the wound on his neck caught her eye. Your neck. Who bit you? And that. There was a lipstick stain in the vicinity of the bite mark. Her son was obviously fooling around with some girl and did not even bother to hide it before coming home. This brazen little minx. Mrs. Yu cursed in her mind. Mrs. Yu turned back and watched Yen Rook's face pale. Her frail body trembled slightly in response to the shocking revelation. Mrs. Yu slapped Yu Tingfeng's arm. Look at you. Where are your principles? You're no longer a young man and you have a girlfriend. It's time you keep yourself in check. I'm heading upstairs. Next time don't simply let random people into our house. He turned away and left. Mrs. Yu yelled after him, You. Tingfeng, what are you saying? She always tried her best to rein in her son but it never worked. Yu Tingfeng was her only son and he had always been an unruly, stubborn child. He listened to no one and expected everyone else to obey him. Being the only son, it was a habit ingrained in him since young. He was in one of his better moods today. He even spoke a few sentences to her. If he was unhappy, he would just shoot an icy glare and Mrs. Yu would keep quiet. Mrs. Yu looked to Yen Rook awkwardly. Rook, why don't you head home first? Yen Rook's eyes were red and watery. Auntie, I want to speak to Tingfeng. I don't blame him. It's just. He shouldn't just pick some random girl. The bite mark looked serious. He may not feel the pain, but I do. Chapter 36. Just why aren't you his type? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 36. Just why aren't you his type? Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yen Rook's sincerity and affection towards Yu Tingfeng were indisputable. Mrs. Yu felt sorry for her. You are too kind. Those hussies out there are worth nothing compared to you, Tingfeng he. Go on up but don't provoke him. If he's in a disagreeable mood, don't enter his room or else the consequences are yours to bear. Truth be told, the words that Mrs. Yu wanted to say were, just why aren't you his type? She did not want to embarrass Yen Rook any further and held her tongue. Yen Rook nodded, I understand. Don't worry. Yu Tingfeng tossed the bag on the floor and the contents peeked out. It was a pair of black high heels. They belonged to Yen Qingxi and were abandoned in the car when she ran off. He squinted at the pair of heels, he had subconsciously brought them home with him. Yu Tingfeng recalled the scene just now. Yen Qingxi had unceremoniously dumped his shirt into the trash can. He laughed, how did I forget to throw these in the trash? Someone knocked on his door. Who's that? Yen Rook's voice reverberated through the door, Tingfeng, it's me. How's the wound on your neck? I can help you apply some medicine. The owner of the voice irked Yu Tingfeng to no end. Who told you to come upstairs? Get lost. Yen Rook bit her lips and said, Tingfeng, I won't go in but I want to speak to you. I'll stand outside here, okay? She was turning 30 next year, 1 year older than Yu Tingfeng. Her time was almost up. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw wrinkles creeping up the side of her eyes despite her meticulous skincare routine. She had to quickly marry into the Yu family. The longer she waited, the slimmer her chances. Yen Rook had gone through all the tricks in the book to obtain Yu Tingfeng's affection but none of them worked. He would not even look at her. Since that night Yu Tingfeng spent with Yen Qingxi 3 years ago, his aversion to her doubled, to the point where she could not meet him even once a month. Yu Tingfeng let out a mocking laugh. The thoughts of Yen Qingxi's hands running across his chest played in his mind as he slowly unbuttoned his shirt. The memory gave him goosebumps. He would not let her escape next time. As he thought of Yen Qingxi, he said, Yen Rook, I advise you to give up your dream of entering the Yu family. You're not worthy. His words struck a chord in Yen Rook. It was her longest dream to marry into the Yu family. At this point, it was her life goal. She wanted to be at the pinnacle of high society, to be greeted respectfully by everyone in Luo City as Mrs. Yu and envied by all the ladies. Yu Tingfeng had spent the past 3 years ignoring her but never once had he completely shut down her dream of marrying into the family. Yen Rook felt herself crumble at those works. She pushed past the bedroom door and exclaimed, Ting Feng, why won't you accept me? I can do better. Just tell me what you want from me. Yu Ting Feng turned his head sharply. The cold glare he gave her cut like a sharpened blade. Who said you could come in? Yen Rook stumbled with her words, Ting Feng, I didn't mean. Her sight fell on the object lying next to his feet. Yen Rook's eyes widened in surprise. Those were a pair of women's high heels. Chapter 37. Who is that **re? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 37. Who is that **re? Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yu Ting Feng never brought in anything that was not his into his bedroom. Even the gifts presented to him by others were kept in a dedicated, separate room. He was very territorial. Anything that was not his did not belong in his room. Other than the scheduled cleaner, his room was off limits even to his parents. Yet, Yu Ting Feng brought in a woman's heels. A woman's heels, a woman's. This meant that the woman was not some random chick that caught Yu Ting Feng's fancy. If so, he would never bring those heels in. Yen Rook's face twisted with rage as she shrieked like a madwoman, You're seeing someone. Who is that **re? Yu Ting Feng frowned in annoyance. Is this woman looking for death? He strode up to Yen Rook and took a swipe at her shins, kicking her out of his room. He was not above hitting women, he had told her before. Especially women like Yen Rook who put a bad taste in his mouth. Leave. The next time you come, I'll break an arm. Mrs. Yu rushed upstairs after hearing the commotion. Yen Rook was on the floor while her son stood aside with a hostile stare. What's going on? What happened? Auntie, Ting Feng has another woman. He has another woman. Yen Rook sounded a bit mad. Mrs. Yu's eyebrows furrowed in puzzlement. Is this a surprise? She knew her son was not interested in Yen Rook but a young man had needs. Having a woman on the side was not unusual. Yen Rook held tightly onto Mrs. Yu's hand and cried out, No, no. This time it's not. You don't understand. Mrs. Yu's wrist ached from the vice-like grip and she shook away Yen Rook's hands. Alright, I don't understand. It's late, why don't you head home? I'm tired. Mrs. Yu spoke in an impatient tone. Yen Rook was dragged out of the Yu family house by the help. Mrs. Yu rubbed her sore wrist and said unhappily, What's with Rook? Yu Ting Feng folded his arms and leaned against the bedroom door frame. Ma. Yes. I never want to see that woman in our house again. A frown appeared on Mrs. Yu's face. But isn't she your girlfriend? Mrs. Yu had a soft spot for Yen Rook. I've never said that. But, everyone else said. Yu Ting Feng interjected, My girlfriend is determined by others. But. You. I will marry in the future but it will never be her. I don't have such substandard taste in women. Yu Ting Feng had never paid any attention to Yen Rook. Her motives and ambitions were clear as day to him, and her acts fooled only herself. To Yu Ting Feng, Yen Rook was akin to a clown thinking herself an actress. If you invite her over again, I will move out. You can live with her, Yu Ting Feng said. Mrs. Yu waved her hand and placated her son, all right. You win. The house is already so lonely. If you move out, I'll be scared. Good. Go on and sleep, Yu Ting Feng nodded. He went into his bedroom and closed the door. Mrs. Yu breathed a sigh. She truly felt that Yen Rook was a good candidate. How did Rook get on the bad side of our little brat? Maybe I can help the situation after he has calmed down. Chapter 38. Quite the bite she has. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 38. Quite the bite she has. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yu Tingfeng bent down and collected Yan Qingxi's heels. He entered the walk-in closet and opened the glass door of the shoe case. There was a wall of men's shoes, all belonging to Yu Tingfeng. He tossed the pair of heels into the shoe case. I'll get rid of them tomorrow. After a shower, he stood in front of the mirror and dried his hair. The wound on his neck was red and swollen. There was a clear indentation of teeth. It was not a light bite. Yu Tingfeng examined the wound. Quite the bite she has. In all his years as a philandering rich boy, this was the first time a woman left him a scar. It made him excited. He did not bother applying any medication. After toweling his hair, he sat back in bed and scrolled his phone. The sudden urge to call Yan Qingxi arose, but no one in his social circle had her number. Plus, he almost forgot that her phone had been smashed. Yu Tingfeng massaged his temples. In the wee hours of the morning, Yan Rook's car stopped in front of the Yu family house. She gazed at the extravagant villa that stood against the night sky with wildness in her eyes. Even in her dreams, she wanted to be the matriarch of the Yu family. It did not matter if she loved Yu Tingfeng or vice versa, what she wanted was the power and money associated with the Yu name. Yan Rook tightened her grip around the steering wheel and swore, I will find out who that WH*Ri is. I will not be so easily beaten. The next day, Yu Tingfeng woke up with a bad mood. He did not even have breakfast and left without a word. Mrs. Yu wondered if she had done anything wrong. Jiang Lai held his breath when he saw Yu Tingfeng's face while delivering documents to his office. Out of a sudden, Yu Tingfeng called out, phone. What of it? Jiang Lai replied. The sound of the pen hitting the table. Phone. Ah. Now he got it, Chairman, you wanted Yan Qingxi's phone. It's smashed. Smashed. Jiang Lai trembled. Didn't you say? What did I say? Yu Tingfeng's eyes narrowed. Sir. Please wait for a while, Jiang Lai gulped. He quickly ran out of the office. After Jiang Lai left, Yu Tingfeng resumed reviewing his documents. He only managed to write 2 words before kicking the trash can near his table. His body coiled in anger. This morning still plagued his mind. Wet dreams. F***ck him. He was a 20.8-year-old man who still had wet dreams. The dream he had. Of all the people, the female lead in his wet dream was none other than Yan Qingxi. This made him even angrier. 3 years ago, he slept with her once. It was only that one time. In the past years, he swore he never thought of her. Even the memory of her face was blurry, after all, she was only a woman. Yet, meeting her again was bad for him. He felt as if there was something that he should be doing but was not, and he could not figure out what. Jiang Lai knocked on the door and walked in with a white smartphone. Chairman Yu, the phone. With a calm face, Yu Tingfeng asked, wasn't it destroyed? Jiang Lai was speechless. You're the one who asked for it to be destroyed, then you ask for it. Now you're asking why it wasn't smashed. What do you want me to do? Yu Tingfeng took the phone and tossed it into his drawer. Buy me a new phone. Chapter 39. The F***king couple on the balcony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 39. The F***king couple on the balcony. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, for you, sir. Jiang Lai asked. The glare that he received made him regret ever asking. Jiang Lai said in a rushed tone, I will get to it at once. Find out who that man is. Jiang Lai wanted to puke blood. Who was this man? Was the chairman going to give him a hint? Thankfully Jiang Lai was gifted with brains and he quickly realized who the man could be. It was probably the foreigner that was in the picture with Yan Qingxi. Yes, sir. I want to know every detail of her life in these past 3 years. Jiang Lai nodded, yes, sir. When he walked out of the office, his head started to ache. Procurement was supposed to be Miss Sun's job, not his. Jiang Lai shook his head. 3 years of whereabouts. Chairman, you never asked before this, but perhaps his memory had been jogged. Men are so fickle. Jiang Lai's phone rang and the caller ID surprised him. Yen Rook. He frowned and hung up the phone. He was not a fan of her. Yen Rook calling him out of nowhere was definitely not a good sign. Yan Qingxi thought that she would feel much better about herself after that showdown with Yu Tingfeng. Yet, the good mood only lasted for a while. When she got home and laid on her bed, her mood took a turn for the worse. She could not feel a sliver of happiness. Yan Qingxi stayed at home for 2 days waiting for news. Insomnia haunted her. The morning sun was rising soon and she was still wide awake in bed. She did not bother to switch on the lights and walked onto the balcony in her sleepwear. She lit a cigarette. She mocked herself. Tricking Yu Tingfeng once was worth being happy. She did it for that temporary high. If Yu Tingfeng was truly mad at her, she would not be the one laughing in the end. Fate was not on her side now, and there she went antagonizing Yu Tingfeng. However, Yan Qingxi could not just let that night go unpunished. She was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and she hated it. She needed to get out of this slump before it was too late. She still had much to do. Yan Qingxi was lost in a daze when something caught her eye. She looked over and saw a couple seeking excitement on the next door balcony. There won't be people, right? A woman panted. Her hands were on the guardrail and her body was bent forward. The man had a cigarette in his mouth and his shirt was still neatly tucked. He spoke in a steady tone, didn't you want some excitement? Scared to show people how horny you are? Hearing that, Yan Qingxi was momentarily stunned. This was an open apartment balcony after all. The distance between the balconies were less than 2 meters. If it were not for the dark skies, Yan Qingxi would be able to witness everything in high definition. A smile formed on her face, this was her first time meeting her neighbor. Perhaps she should say hi. She wanted to snap a photo but remembered her phone was stolen by a certain ***. She shook her head regretfully. She lit another cigarette and continued watching the couple's silhouettes. She could not sleep, and if they wanted to put on a free show, why not? Before Yan Qingxi finished her cigarette, the woman on the balcony caught sight of the lighted cancer stick and screamed. She covered her face and pushed the man away. At her hasty retreat, her panties were abandoned on the balcony. Yan Qingxi leaned lazily against the guardrail. It was probably time for her to go in. How's your libido? The man asked lewdly as he smoothed his clothes deliberately. He had a raspy voice that was surprisingly attractive on this quiet night. There was no hint of embarrassment in his tone despite being caught **king in public. Yan Qingxi stared in surprise. He probably was already aware of her presence from the beginning. Oh, how shameless. Chapter 40. A Pie That Fell from the Sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 40. A Pie That Fell from the Sky. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yan Qingxi flicked some ash from the cigarette and answered, so, not as high as yours. Really? Any talents? Yan Qingxi nodded, yeah. Have a nice waist. The man on the balcony clearly understood the rebuff. He continued smoking and said, you frightened my girl today. Yan Qingxi laughed, and you too scared away my tiredness. Since you're not sleeping, how about a go? Yan Qingxi took a final drag before snuffing out the cigarette. Boy, I only play with new toys. Not interested in second hands. She waved and went back in. She heard the man curse as she entered her room. Yan Qingxi felt much better after that. Someone's sexual appetite was not satisfied and probably would not be sleeping anytime soon. Miss Mai was here first thing in the morning. It was 6 o'clock and the sun had just woken up. Yan Qingxi had less than 2 hours of sleep and was yawning when she opened the door. She leaned against the doorframe with her eyes shut. Miss Mai, why are you here so early? Miss Mai appeared to be talking to someone who was very chipper. King Jean, you're living here. What a coincidence. Yan Qingxi opened her eyes blurrily. The figure looked like the man on the balcony from last night. He did not answer Miss Mai's question and asked one instead. Miss Mai, she's one of yours. Yes, yes. She isn't famous yet, but soon. Please provide her with some guidance. Right. Yan Qingxi's sleepwear was neither immodest nor conservative, yet the color black was a stark contrast to her fair skin. She was lazing against the doorframe with her half-lidded eyes and red, pouty lips. Coupled with her tousled hair, Yan Qingxi was oozing sex appeal. The man spoke suddenly, just so happens my new song requires an MV and all this while, I couldn't find a suitable female lead. She has the face. Perhaps you guys are interested. Miss Mai lost her composure and exclaimed, really? To be able to star in your MV would be an honor for our Qingxi. Her words were perfunctory and she did not expect the relationship to bear fruit so quickly. After all, she was aiming to get Yan Qingxi into the acting scene and not the music scene. Although King Jean was a godlike figure in the music industry, Miss Mai did not expect him to be of much help. It was truly a miracle. Like a starving man who found a pie that just fell from the sky, Miss Mai counted her blessings. A dazed Yan Qingxi heard some mutterings in her ear. Jin Xuechu. Yan Qingxi opened her eyes and looked at the man's face. The sunglasses could not hide his eyes, and when their eyes met, there was a silent consensus between them that went beyond these courteous pleasantries. None of them were good people. A second passed, they smiled politely to each other. No one mentioned the incident last night and whatever unpleasant words were kept within their chests. Yan Qingxi glanced at the outstretched hand. She slowly moved her hand for the shake. Yan Qingxi. The man standing in front of her had on a pair of sunglasses and a baseball cap. One could tell from his strong jawline and pretty lips that he was a hit with the masses. Whether intentional or not, his grip on her hand was a tad too firm. When he let go, his fingers lingered on her skin. This was intentional. Yan Qingxi chuckled internally. F***ck, this man is interested.